Jesus of Nazareth, Heaven, Hell, Happiness. I repeat the title, Jesus of Nazareth, Heaven, Hell, Happiness. If you are interested in this topic, in understanding what Jesus thought of human life upon planet Earth and the relative significance of life here and the life to come, you would find the contents of this video interesting, I dare say even fascinating. If, however, you are not interested in these somewhat distant topics, as some might think, which is quite erroneous, then you are advised not to see this any further. Now let's get started. All of us know that most religions, if not all religions, provide inducements to believers and prospective believers to lead a particular kind of life upon the earth. If you lead a religious life, then you will be rewarded with heaven. If you don't do so, then you will be punished with hell. Now, if I may put this in the light of modern psychology, particularly behavioral psychology, it simply means incentivizing religion with the promise of pleasure or the threat of pain. Now, what is the principle of behavioral psychology involved here? It is this, that according to the understanding in this discipline, human beings have the tendency to repeat pleasurable actions and experiences and to avoid painful actions and experiences. So, the only way to attract people to a particular possibility, prospect, is to project before them a prospect of infinite pleasure. Therefore, you'll find that in all religions, or in religions where this is the case, when life after death, paradise, heaven, or whatever, is projected or imagined or described, great exaggerations are resorted to. Every effort is made to intensify the idea of pleasure and therefore of desirability vis-a-vis religion, and correspondingly, every effort is made to intensify pain and suffering in relation to hell. Now, this is something that's very easily understood. So you find that proclamations of religions or religious proclamations, I can say this only about Christianity, which is religion that I am most familiar with. I have a noting acquaintance of other religions, but I don't want to showcase my ignorance, if you don't mind. So I'll stay confined to Christianity, not because I don't respect or value other religions. If I love my fellow human beings, I'll also respect what they believe and what they cherish. And no degree of Christian angularity or bias will prevent me from doing so. I make my stand completely clear. I refuse to abide by these mean-minded, uninformed notions. Whether or not all religions are equally true, and all, that's not the concern here. To me, all human beings are equally valuable. Therefore, I'm bound to love them and respect them equally. Just as I respect myself, I respect every human being, irrespective of the religion that person practices. That's where I stand. Neither heaven nor hell will prevent me from doing so. I have to be very forthright and blunt in this respect. Now, what is important for us to note is this. Jesus does not resort to this strategy at all. This is something that even Christians would be surprised to hear from me. Most Christians, because they are daily badgered, at least weekly badgered by what is called ministry of the word, they think that Jesus came to preach heaven and hell. Whereas references to heaven and hell are virtually almost nearly absent in the teachings of Jesus Christ. Instead, he puts all his emphasis on life on the earth, and in particular on the possibility of and even the duty to be happy. Please understand. Because there's another gross misunderstanding that prevails in this respect. The more ardent a believer, a Christian, thinks himself or herself to be, the more he or she is convinced that he or she should look miserable, should have nothing to do with happiness. The more miserable you look, the more unhappy you seem, the more religious you are. In one of my earlier videos, I said that Christians go around, because of this mistaken notion, wearing a funeral look. And I repeat the same thing because that's my conviction, that's what I've seen all along. And if you see a Christian who is of a kind of, shall I say, a happy, cheerful disposition, he could attract a bit of suspicion, as if something is wrong with him. The Marthamites, for example, had a lot of difficulty with the late Metropolitan Philippos Mark Chrysostom because God had blessed him with a tremendous, unrivaled sense of humor. Humor used to ooze out of him effortlessly, and he found a lot of happiness in sharing that particular gift, which he sincerely believed was God's gift to him, because I have discussed this matter at length with him, and he didn't have the slightest doubt about it. Whether other people agree with him or not is a different matter, but he ardently believed that this was a talent God entrusted him with, and therefore he should be generous in employing it to the entertainment as well as edification of the people, because there is always a seed of thought in every item of humor that is shared with people. That's as an aside. So Jesus was clearly committed to human happiness. You want an evidence? Well, just think of the Sermon on the Mount, how it opens. It opens with the Beatitudes. Beatitude means extreme happiness. Perhaps the equivalent word that we are familiar with would be ecstasy, bliss. You know, the Hindu concept of God as Satchidananda, Sat Chit Ananda. Ananda is bliss. It is not just pleasure or happiness in the usual secular or worldly sense of the term. It is a very special state of happiness, rarefied happiness, bliss. So Jesus was certainly committed to it, certainly concerned about it. He was very keen that human beings should have an ample measure of this happiness. Now think of the proclamation of the very purpose of his ministry in this world. John chapter 10 verse 10, where Jesus says that he came that everyone should have life in all its fullness. Do you think a life of fullness will be devoid of happiness? Or that a life of fullness will be incandescent with happiness? What do you think is a better understanding? Surely a life illumined with happiness. That's what Jesus envisaged. And he did two things. He approached this goal of promoting fullness of life incandescent with joy or happiness. He adopted two strategies for this. One was negative, one was positive. Negatively, he tried to remove hindrances to the attainment and retention or full enjoyment of happiness. For example, all the negative things that people do, and by the way, even the ministry of healing that he exercised had this reference, because sickness is something that robs people of their happiness. You don't go to an ICU to see people merrymaking. hospital is a place of gloom, except in very rare cases, for example, the case of a childbirth and all that. Otherwise, in most instances, a hospital is a place of gloom, not of happiness. So certainly the ministry of healing that Jesus has exercised is a reference to his commitment to promoting human happiness to the utmost. Now, positively, he tried to promote human happiness by encouraging and facilitating the development of human beings to the point of their transformation. The word transformation actually means going beyond the present form. The root of the word transformation is form, the present state of existence. In the present state of existence, you are more entitled to misery than to happiness because you are underdeveloped. If you are in a state which falls short of what you should be and what you could be, then you will certainly be unhappy. Suppose you are made to study in Standard 5, whereas you are qualified to be a first-year postgraduate student, your experience will be misery. It's as simple as that. And with respect to the quality and substance of our life, potentially we are PhD students, we are still stuck at the kindergarten level, and that's the reason why most people think that religious life must be associated more with gloom than with gladness, whereas we don't see that at all in the case of Jesus. In fact, Jesus was an enigma to his contemporaries because unlike those who conform to the traditional stereotypical notions about what a truly religious, pietistic person looked like, he led a very ordinary and cheerful life. For example, there is a passage where Jesus says, John came to you as an ascetic person. He came to you not drinking and merrymaking. Therefore, you said he had a demon. The Son of Man has come to you eating and drinking, and now you say that he's a sinner. So that's an attitude that I've been referring to from the outset. From the religious perspective, a person who leads a normal life, who is reasonably happy, and who does not make a public display of a life of self-denial, a theme that Jesus deals at length in the 6th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, such a person is impious. Such a person is too worldly to be godly. Jesus does not think so. He sincerely believed that life was meant to be celebrated. And therefore, from his view of life, happiness could never be excluded. So, two complementary approaches to promoting human happiness. One is remove the hindrances on the path of pursuing human happiness. Second, promote the ideal conditions or the facilitating, enabling conditions for people to pursue and attain happiness. Now, here, of course, I have to emphasize that Jesus' idea of happiness was different to the idea of happiness that prevailed then and even now. It will be very interesting to examine our idea of what it means to be happy. People differ widely and in fact wildly in their understanding of what constitutes happiness for them. Jesus had a very definite idea of happiness. Well, this is not the occasion for me to take that up for detailed examination because that would cause the time to spin out of control. So now, as I said, there is a very significant contrast between Jesus and the merchants of religion, the peddlers, the hucksters, the retailers of religion in our times. And what is that? It must be clearly understood. Well, the merchants and peddlers of religion today try to promote the religions they represent by projecting great happiness to be attained in life beyond death. Or conversely, great suffering to be attracted or endured, unending, ultimate and unending suffering beyond death, accept this particular mode of religion, this particular version of religion, my religion. So, the total focus, the entire attention is directed towards life after death. Now let's examine this particular approach a little more. I, for one, find it very difficult to believe. I have to be honest with you. I find it difficult even for myself. No, I'm not talking about other people. Let me be very frank, absolutely candid, truthful. I find it very difficult to attach my imagination, my heart's desire, my soul's delight, and my mental ecstasy to heaven as it is projected in the Bible and understood among Christians. For example, take the idea that heaven is a place of abundance. In my Father's house are many mansions. Or the idea that the streets of heaven are paved with gold and studded with very precious stones. Take the idea that sun never sets in heaven. Or take any idea about heaven prevalent among Christians. I ask you a very honest, simple question. Are you telling me that you are really excited about it if that is what awaits you in life after death? Are you really excited about it? I'm afraid not. But we don't have the freedom to be honest with ourselves in this regard, because as Christians, we are obliged to be, and we have no freedom not to be interested and to accept it as it is. Heaven, oh yes, I'm straight-headed there. And when I think of heaven, I count all the sorrows and privations and destitutions and sufferings in this world of no account. It is not true at all. What is the truth? The truth is that we call upon God, we try to be on the good in the good books of God just to avoid suffering on this earth. That is a fact. As well as to gain maximum blessings or advantages or worldly gains by cultivating God's favor. That is really the truth about us, which nobody will admit in public life. So the idea that we are all waiting just to fly, sprout wings and fly to heaven is an utterly dishonest idea. And certainly, as I said, and I repeat, it bears repetition, heaven as it is projected and as it is made known to us is not a particularly desirable place. Now let me ask you a more provocative question. I'm asking this question to my Christian friends. Christians are in the habit of ridiculing Muslims with reference to what is offered to them in the paradise that awaits them. If you are a very devout Muslim, then after death, you will inherit that, you will go to that paradise where 70 virgins await you, etc. I don't go into all the details. Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. Are you telling me that the prospect of 70 virgins is less attractive to a Christian than the prospect of a big mansion? Are you telling me that? Which is superior? Which is more attractive? In fact, I was reading an article some time back on why more and more Christians are converting to Islam in the UK. Large-scale conversions are taking place in the UK. Christians becoming Muslims. And one of the reasons pointed out is that if there is an open competition between Muslim heaven and Christian heaven will lose out, because in comparison, the Christian heaven, that article says, looks anemic, pale, unattractive. There's a point there. However, I don't think both assumptions are correct. And even if they're correct, they don't matter a thing to me. I have to tell you the fact. Because as Jesus insisted, which I believe is the truth, What is important is not what awaits me in the life after death, but what quality of life and what extent of happiness is possible for me. What degree of fulfillment for me is possible for me to attain. And now you think of all the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's all about attaining fulfillment here and now. There may be occasional references, for example, in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, there's a reference to life after death. But these are stray, casual references in comparison to it. The felicity or the happiness or the ecstasy, the fulfillment to be attained in the life here and now, far preponderates. They're far in excess. Whereas Christians are obliged to overlook that and attach their heart singularly to the life to come, the paradise, the heaven that awaits them. It is utter dishonesty. I have to say this very clearly, it's utter dishonesty. Now, I come to one of the most important parts of my argument. True spirituality for Jesus Christ is not neglecting our life upon the earth in anticipation of some kind of recompense or some kind of compensatory reward in life after death. True spirituality is A, pursuing happiness here upon this earth, but understanding happiness aright. It is not happiness as the world understands it, and therefore the primary step towards it is deliverance from the worldly, culture-driven, shallow understanding of happiness, which becomes indistinguishable from pleasure. From a worldly point of view, happiness is equal to pleasure. Whereas in many contexts, pleasure is the exact opposite of happiness. Now let me try and make that distinction clear. Pleasure is all about fleeting enjoyment, sensory, physical enjoyment. For example, you have a hearty meal. You may feel cheerful while that's in progress. But what happens after the big meal is over? You actually feel the burden of it. You have to carry the burden of it in your stomach and struggle maybe for an hour or two to get rid of it. If you can, go for a long walk or something. It adds nothing to the quality of your life. It creates for a fleeting period of time the illusion of some quality of life. On the other hand, Jesus says, blessed are you when men revile you and persecute you. Blessed means happy. Happy are you when men revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil falsely against you for my sake. Now, how is that a source of happiness? I'm taking the extreme case in the Beatitude. All other items of Beatitude are less difficult to accept and understand. This is the most difficult teaching. Therefore, let me take that. Now, in this world, if you want to do something good, something righteous, something that impacts the present state, what's called the status quo, in order to improve the conditions so as to promote the welfare of people, particularly with reference to the poor, the downtrodden, the disenfranchised, so on and so forth, which also involves you are not towing the line of the status quo, then you have to suffer for it. It's impossible in this world to do good without paying a price for it. That's when Mahatma Gandhi was shot. Albert Einstein said, it shows how dangerous it is to do good. It's very true. Well, look at the cross of Calvary. That's a brutal, unmistakable demonstration of the cost that needs to be paid in order to do something good in this world. Jesus went about doing good, only good. What happened? They crucified him. Why was Lincoln shot? Why was Martin Luther King shot? Why was even Lord Buddha sought to be persecuted? You will be reviled, you'll be persecuted in this world. But what happens? How does that become happiness? When you endure, when you refuse to be discouraged, what happens is that you experience a tremendous growth in your personality. There's no other way that the depth of your being can be stirred. A life of happiness alienates you from the depth of your own being. You become superficial. A life of sensuous enjoyment makes you more and more superficial. And superficiality, as Soren Kierkegaard quite rightly said, is an insult to the human. The greatest insult to a human being is to call him a shallow person. That's what Kierkegaard says, and I believe in it. What's the beauty of life? It's depth. And what is human growth? Human growth is growth in relation to the depth of your being. Depth. When you talk about someone that is a deep or she's a deep person, and it creates a particular impression. On the other hand, when you say about a person, oh, he's shallow, you feel alienated right away. Just one word is enough to drive this wedge of alienation between you and the other person. And if somebody were to say this about you, oh, he is shallow, you feel depressed. Or somebody were to say, oh, he is deep, deep. At this time, I recall a particular instance. I think it was in 1993 or 94 that I visited the eastern region of Germany called Essen, the University of Essen, because a friend of mine called Professor Victorio Hustler was a member, was a professor, a full-time professor in the Department of Philosophy of Essen University. When I visited that university, they were having a very interesting discussion. The discussion was as follows. Suppose there is a railway track. A train is coming. And at a particular point, the train is forking. Forking means it's spreading in or splitting in two directions. The train can go either this way or that way. Now, if the train is directed on this track, it will result in the death of 100 people. On the other hand, if the train is directed on this track, only 10 people will die. You are the person operating the control. On which railway track will you guide the train? This is the question. And they were discussing. I'm not a philosopher, so I kept quiet. And because I was a guest, almost towards the end of the discussion, I was asked the question, now, what do you have to say? Almost in a condescending manner. Oh, what is a man from India, a teacher of literature for that matter, what can he say among these great philosophers? They were all great philosophers, no doubt about it. I told them that I will have the right to guide the train. The consensus among the people there was that everyone said we will direct the train towards the track which will result in the death of only 10 people, as I can see. I said I would do that only if I am one of the 10. I will decide to direct the train to go on that track only if I am one of the 10. Because what business do I have to decide that the others should die? I said this and I stopped. This is all I said. And I tell you, there was absolute silence for a minute. And the professor in charge said, your answer is deep. Friends, that was the first time I understood the bliss contained in the word deep. Ever since, I've been fascinated by this word deep, deep. And it has led me to very significant insights these many years. Your answer is deep. So Jesus is actually committed to our happiness, but it is a happiness of the depth, not the titillations on the surface. It's important for us to remember this because we're living in a culture which is completely committed, almost blindly, fanatically committed to the titillations of the surface, the sensations on the surface. As Oswald Spengler, a controversial writer, but a profound writer, in his classic work, The Decline of the West, if you come across that book, it's in 2 volumes, please read it, The Decline of the West. He makes a very interesting observation about modern culture. And if I can recall his words from memory, he says, ours is a culture that is in flight from the depths. We have perfected only the genius of dealing with the surface. That's absolutely correct. Ours is a culture that's in flight from, because we are afraid of the depth. Ours is a culture which is in flight from the depth. We have perfected only the genius of dealing with the surface. So our happiness, the happiness we can understand, is only the happiness of the surface, the beauty of the surface, the virtue of the surface, the piety of the surface, the refinement of the surface, the richness of the surface. We are alienated from the depth of things, depth of things. The crucifixion of Jesus Christ, though from a worldly point of view, is an atrocity, from a spiritual point of view, it is a favor because it resulted in opening up the depth of Jesus Christ to those who had the capacity to sense the depth of their fellow human beings. And therefore, the Roman centurion, not a single Jew, the Roman centurion said truly he was the Son of God because his depth was stirred. My dear friends, therefore, the truly spiritual thing to do is not to avoid the happiness of life. Celebrate life. Life was envisaged by God to be a celebration. But let it be a celebration of the depth of your being. Depth of your being. What a beautiful thing it is. And I believe each time you celebrate the depth of your life, the depth of your being, you are bearing witness to the real paradise. The real paradise. Thank you. And may every one of you be blessed, blessed abundantly. And may you dare to be happy. Profoundly, infectiously, compellingly happy.